Welcome to the Binding Mind podcast. My name is Lorenzo Salazar.
And I'm the inspector. Let's jump in.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Oh, I want to dance with somebody. Oh, with somebody who loves me. Hey, Binding Minders. You guessed it. Today's episode is brought to you by Ian's Interesting Facts. We're more creative in the shower. Specifically, a warm one. Warm water, plus a relaxed state of mind, increases dopamine in the brain, breeding creativity. Enjoy today's conversation.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Binding Minds. Our guest today is no stranger to the advertising world. He is currently the creative lead for the Evermore magazine. Please help us welcome Armando Godinez.
Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thank you, man. I really appreciate it. It's humbling to be asked, especially this is my first go around with the podcast, so I'm excited about this.
Oh no, we understand that right now it's a very busy season for you. So to even take a small time out of your day, I mean, it means a lot for us, and we appreciate it. But we're super excited to have you on here. So while I was researching, doing a little bit more of who you are and your background, I stumbled across a term that I found really interesting, and that's multidisciplinary designer. And we're really interested if you can emphasize on that a little bit more for our audience to know what that is.
I think the main reason that I have it set up that way is because throughout my career, I've done a bunch of different things within design. So whether it was learning Flash off the fly whenever I first graduated from college, because I didn't learn it whenever I was at Tech, I took After Effects. And so that was one of those things where didn't know it, needed it for my job, learned it, got a manual, and, just kind of dove deep into it. And then kind of same thing whenever, we were in transition of getting phasing Quark out. If anybody remembers Quark, was the publication standard back in the day, and Adobe just rolled out InDesign, and having to just like jump in and learn that. So I think whenever I say multidisciplinary, it's a bunch of different things within the print space, within the digital space, because I've done everything from branding, logo design, editorial, which I'm currently doing right now, digital animation. Like I said, I did way back in the day with Flash, which that doesn't exist anymore. So I've kind of touched a bunch of different points throughout my career. And so I think that's why I like using that term, using a bunch of different things, illustration. I kind of like to delve into a bunch of different things within the design space, per se.
I think that's really interesting that some of those things you did because you needed it. I mean, it was like you graduated college and you're like, oh, hey, I know I have everything I need to know. And then one of the first things you need is something you weren't taught. But I guess to that, can you give us a quick overview of how you got here in your career? I mean, what that looks like. Sorry, I need to adjust my headphones.
You did. So yeah, like I said, I went to Texas Tech University. I went through the design program, which is one of the top programs in Texas, if not in the country. We're kind of underrated because they produce some big names that have come out of it. But that's I've gone junior college route, got my basics, transferred into Tech, and then got into the program and just kind of loved design because I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do. I thought I was going to do fine arts. And the more I delved into design and just the graphic design program, the more I was like, I think this is what I'm really passionate about and I really want to learn. So graduated 2004 from Tech, stayed here locally. I ended up getting an internship at the time when I was at Tech with Smooth Fusion. So if you know them, they're a web development company here locally. Worked for them, internship that turned into a job opportunity, which was great because then I didn't have to go job hunting. And I was there for 2 years. And then unfortunately got laid off because they expanded too fast, too quickly. And so within that, randomly, I lost my job. Within a week, I had another job whenever I just cold called all the agencies in town and ended up picking up a job at Price Group. I ended up picking up an interview and I got the job a week later. So that was kind of crazy. Stayed there for about 5.5 years. And then I was kind of like, I need to start to transition. Like, I just felt like there was a little bit of a ceiling there. And then transitioned to another agency called ACOC Media Works and became the art director there and really kind of dove deep into rebrands and client success. Everybody uses the term ROI, which it is important in the client world, agency world. They return on investment, and so I really learned the business side within the agency world, which was great. And then kind of the same thing, kind of got a little burnout, kind of hit a ceiling there, and I was like, you know what, I need to switch gears. I knew Michelle Hoagland, who was the creative director at the time at Texas Tech Office of Communications and Marketing. I reached out to her, just DM'd her, and was like, "Hey, I hear y'all have a position open," and that turned into me making the transition to tech. So, and then it's kind of evolved a little bit within the last few years. We got a new person that's currently the vice president of marketing and communications. His name is Matt Dewey, so he's my main boss, and so that's kind of transitioned the office a little bit, and that's what kind of brought on Evermore, because the first thing he said was, "Do y'all not have a university magazine?" And everybody's like, "No." And so that was one of his main things that he really wanted to push forward. And I think that got expedited during the pandemic because we were all pushed, home. We all left. I remember it was March 18th and they were like, "All right, get all your stuff. You got to go home." And so that time period, we got the chance to kind of explore and say, "Hey, if we're going to do this, what does it look like? What does that feel like?" And that's kind of how I made my way into where I'm currently at as the creative lead for Evermore.
If I got a term to explain your career, it'd probably be tenacity. Because most people, when they go through a trial where they get laid off, I mean, I'm sure you felt at certain points kind of a sense of defeat, like, man, here we go, first layoff. You get that sense of not per se failure, but the sense of like, man, where do I go from here? Then the fact that you just picked up cold call, I think cold calling in today's world, not very many students are willing to do that.
Now they're a little too scared about that. But no, I think it's that. I mean, I'm coming from like a really small town of like maybe 400 or 500 people. It's you're out there, it's farmers, that same kind of grit, tenacity, which I think is interesting because that's kind of how we kind of set up Evermore and tech in general is kind of the same setup. We want it to be gritty, tenacious, those types of things. I kind of feel like I value that coming from my upbringing and just, I got laid off and I'm like, damn, this sucks. Like I had to tell my girlfriend and, and coincidentally at the time I was about to get a ring and then, yeah, luckily I didn't sign because I was going to take out a loan to get a ring.
Yeah.
Luckily I didn't sign it. I was like, you know what? I'll wait till Monday. And then sure enough, layoff happens on Monday. And it was all fortuitous for a reason. But yeah, I kind of sulked for about a day and I was like, all right, gotta find a job. I gotta figure out what to do next.
Where's your hometown?
So I'm originally from a little town called Lasbuddy. So a tiny little town up in the edge of the Panhandle.
Okay.
Yeah, so not that small, literally a speck on the map. Like it's just farmland and cows.
Well, see, wow. I'm from Lockney, so when you say farmland, I'm like, oh yeah, I definitely understand what he's talking about and his upbringing and stuff.
Yeah,
you work out the cotton fields, hoeing cotton, or you're just out tarping modules and those types of cotton field work.
Yeah, no, man. I mean, I went through all that in the summer times, out in the fields. I mean, I try to relate that to my daughter, my oldest, and like you just don't understand like how you grew up to where now you don't have to worry about any of those things. But yeah, I think all that from coming from those backgrounds. I'm a first gen. Like my family came over here in the 70s from Mexico, from Central Mexico. So there's a lot of those things that are kind of baked into who I am and kind of my personality. But yeah, that's one of those things that I've kind of figured out through this is like problem solver. If you can be a problem solver within your industry, you're going to be really useful to anybody that's around. And that's one of those things with me. It's if I run up to something, I'm just like, all right, how can I figure something out? How can I either fix this or figure something that's going to work with this?
Yeah, there's always answer to the solution. And
Uh-huh.
so, would you say that kind of helps lead into what makes, uh, a creative director, somebody that who has to learn to problem solve tasks as they're going? I mean, there's always going to be certain walls you're going to hit, but in your words, what do you think makes a great creative director?
I think the biggest thing is, whenever you're in that role is trying to figure out, all right, like what is your role within the organization, right? It's like, what are your responsibilities, what are your duties, so that you can be successful within your team and within a department, however that's set up. And then the other thing is like being able to intake ideas, and not thinking that you know everything, right? Because that's never a good thing, is thinking that you know everything. Is intake ideas, but ultimately a lot of the decision making I have is based on intuition. So it's trust. It's like the gut thing for me. I'm like, if that doesn't make sense, I'm like, let's not do that. But I think that's a lot of the experience from the different places that I've been to, is learning to trust those things. And then the other thing is, like if you're overseeing a team, challenging those team members to be better and push beyond what they think their limits are, right? You always want to do that, because that's how you get the best out of your team, and the members are in that group. Is you want to try to challenge them and try to get kind of push and get more out of them, push ideas, trying to innovate a little bit more. And then with that is, just shouting out those individuals. People like to be praised and told, you've done a good job. You want to be able to have them feel valued and be shouted out. And, whenever something is accomplished, I think that's always great in terms of a leadership role, is to make sure is challenge your team, mentor them, but also, shout them out, make them feel valued. Otherwise, they're going to end up leaving, because they're not going to feel like they're a part of the team. They're valued. So I think those are some characteristics that I've tried to bring within a leadership role.
I'll say this: if you haven't heard it in a while, our very own Nikki Davis shouts your praises for the way that you praised and grew her often.
Yeah, we have it on record too. So if you don't believe us, hey, I think it's
Yeah,
episode one
season
of
one.
season one. She praises, that you were a great mentor for her, and I think for something like that, it just is something that passes on from individual to individual. Now, do you have a mentor that you that helped, sway you into this role, or somebody that has really impacted the way you handle some of your workflow and things like that?
Yeah, I think, excuse me, I have a couple of friends that I kind of consider mentors. So whenever I was at Price Group at the time, I was a designer, and they brought in an art director. Her name's Christy Melcher, and I really got to learn the business side from her and how things kind of work, because she always kind of got that side of it. And then also at the same time, we hired another designer. His name is Chris Rios. And
Oh yeah,
so,
I know Chris.
yeah,
Great
so
guy.
Chris, we're so great guy, hilarious. So we all became kind of like the three amigos. That's what kind of we called ourselves. So we became very tight with each other, and we would bounce off ideas off each other all the time. And obviously we kind of all split and went our separate ways. But I still, I'll go have lunch with Chris, maybe once a month, and just throw ideas off of him, or he'll text me. Christy will be kind of the same way. She'll just, ping me, see how I'm doing. If she wants to feel something out. I think that time was really critical for me, because I got to have that mentorship from them, because they were older, established designers. And so that really helped me a lot. The other person I would say would be Carla Tedeschi at Texas Tech School of Art. I think I learned so much from her. And even now I still try to have, like a once a year kind of get together with her, in between semesters, because she's so busy overseeing the graphic design program. And so, I usually will hit her up for questions or things that maybe I need some help with. So I think Carla's been great, and like I say, Christy and Chris. I think I always kind of go back towards them, and then my friend Susie Pfeiffer, who's at UNC. She's a creative director there. I'll hit her up, or she'll hit me up for stuff. So I think it's always nice to have to kind of know a lot of the designers within the community and kind of stay connected. But I would say, those two at the time, whenever I was at Price Group, really influenced me quite a bit.
I love the fact that whether it was your boss at Price or another designer that got hired on, as you guys have grown, you guys haven't stopped mentoring each other. I think that's something that maybe a misconception. I know that when I was younger, it was, oh, you only need a mentor when you're young. You only need a mentor until you get where you're going. And I couldn't have been more wrong. I mean, firsthand right there, you guys heard it. Armando, still leans on the people that mentored him years ago, and they lean on each other. And I mean, that's invaluable.
Yeah, because I think most people looking on the outside in think that, hey, he knows, like this, he just has his plan, the way he works things. You're very creative, but you just always got to keep learning. There always has to be influence, which I'm sure you may have your favorite, certain. If I know Nikki mentioned something that she likes to go out and look at different things like at antique shops, and you may have your method as well to where you find influence. So, uh, leaning on towards other designers and definitely mentors. I know that's pretty cool to hear that you still reach out and do that, because most people are, I don't know if the term is a little, they may think that they don't need to, or they can just figure out all the questions. But I think just reaching out to sources and keep learning is a big key factor for designers.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think that's one of those things is you should never get you should never get in the point where you think you know everything, right? Because I don't know everything. It's constantly changing, right? You guys see it everywhere. We're talking about AI and all these other things out here these days. Things are always kind of changing and evolving, and you have to keep learning those things. Just like I was telling you, I came out of school and I had to learn Flash. I didn't know the program, and then whenever I was at Price, Adobe drops InDesign, and that you have to learn that from scratch. It's just one of those things. You do it because it's what you need for your work, and to try to do the different things that you're going to encounter in the world. So yeah, I lean on a lot of that stuff, and then yeah, going back to Nikki, I think it was great being able to mentor her because she came in as an intern, and I really got to take that leadership and be able to mentor her. But then also, whenever she finished school, we were able to offer her a job and then put her on full time and mentor her because she was talented, and I was able to kind of key in on that and want to keep her around. Obviously, I think that's one of those things. Again, I'm very intuitive with people, and so I can kind of key in on like strengths and weaknesses, and if they're going to be the right fit, right, where for whatever position it is, if you're hiring. And I think that's the thing with her is, same thing, good work ethic, tenacity with her, really creative. And so it was nice to be able to do that with her. And like I said, we always keep in touch still. And so it's been great to be able to like see her. If I go up there to Slate, I'll go say hi or whatever, give her a hug. But yes, I value those personal connections with all, whether it's interns or people that I worked with, and we really got to connect. I think that always kind of comes back in some form or way. And I kind of feel like I still kind of mentor her if she has questions or whatever, and she'll reach out, and I'm more than happy to do that.
We're appreciative of it. We're big fans of Nikki. So
Yeah, she's great.
do do we want to jump into Evermore a little bit here? We want the people that may not know what it is to get some insider knowledge. Do you want? I know you touched on it a little bit with Matt Dewey wanting a publication for the university, but can you jump into Evermore a little bit about like, really what it is?
Yeah, sure. So the main purpose for Evermore is to kind of help captivate, inspire, educate through unique storytelling and kind of showcasing Red Raiders again, grit, tenacity, whether it's alumni, faculty, staff, kind of telling those, kind of under the radar stories, more or less. So that's kind of what we've kind of put together a mission, and that's what Evermore kind of embodies are those three things: captivate, inspire, educate. So if the stories don't do those three things, we don't write them. They'll get tabled, or they'll get pushed into another area within the communication office. And so if it's not Evermore worthy, then it gets pushed somewhere else, and it may, have a life somewhere else. But for, my editor, Glennis Young, she's the editor, she's my boss, but she's very selective about those stories that make it into the next issue or future issues. And if people are thinking, where is Evermore coming from? This is not a Taylor Swift reference, but it's coming from a Matador song. So the last two lines, strive for honor evermore, long live the Matadors. That's where the Evermore part came from. And it was one of those things where we had a couple planning meetings and we were trying to hash out the name of it, and it just kind of clicked in one of those meetings. It was as simple as just seeing the Matador song. And we're like, is it as simple as that? Yes, Evermore. Like, it just makes sense.
So we understand the tenacity portion based off your background, but the Evermore magazine constantly has new, um, forward-thinking elements to it. So we understand how your background does bring a lot to that, but how do you keep your team continuously, or how does the team continuously think in a forward-thinking matter all together?
I think that's what's been unique about it. I think, again, our boss Matt kind of put that charge in us. Like, he wanted this to feel different, wanted it to have that ethos of that mission that we've come up with. And so it starts as simple as like the paper choices, right? Like, the paper that we have is like very tactile. It's got a very specific feel to it, high quality. Again, the font treatments, all that stuff. Kind of baked into it. That's kind of where it started from. And then it's always just, can we do something that's a little bit unique and kind of push? And some of those stories have kind of lent themselves to that. So if, like, for instance, the issue 3, which was the all white cover, they had the blind emboss on it, and then the foil stamp on it. That was because it was a 20th anniversary of remembering Columbia. So the Columbia space shuttle disaster. And so that was kind of recounting some Red Raiders that were actually at NASA at the time. So the cover kind of came about from a thought that our Matt had, and he was thinking, is there a way where we can make the cover feel like the shuttle? And he kind of kept saying that. And then he sent me a photo of one of the shuttles that he took a photo of, I think is Endeavor in California. And I really honed in on it and looked at it. And I was seeing, like, he was talking about these tiles. And I was like, okay, that would be kind of interesting. And I was thinking in my head, textures, those types of things. So that's kind of what spurred on that. So it's kind of thinking through the concept, the story itself, because I think the story drives a lot of those things that we do, to try to innovate and do something a little bit different. So I think that's one of those things that we're always kind of keen at, we kind of hone in on, is we want to do something that's kind of unique and different. But it also has to fit within the concept that we're doing for whatever story it is that it fits. So
Yeah.
I always talk about concept is king. You can't just make something look good. Like, it has to tie back into the story, right? I think that's what kind of sticks up, like, makes us stand apart a little bit from some of the other magazines that are out there.
Yeah, I mean, you definitely, it seems that you are adding a lot more of like from the tangibles to the intangible of the entire magazine. From the moment you feel that, you feel the texture, when you think of the space shuttle, things like that. So that's something that we did notice. So that's pretty cool that you implement that as well into what the storyline is, as you kind of work a little bit backwards from that and then just bring all those elements together. So, I mean, y'all do a great job at it.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I mean, I think it's one of those things that's kind of how I've work, is always kind of work backwards. Like, the cover ends up becoming the last thing that we do.
Yeah.
And so it's just one of those things that just randomly has happened within the last few issues. Is we kind of establish the overall concepts and designs for the stories that we have for the issue, and then then we kind of delve into some of these other concepts for like, all right, what does the cover look like? How does that tie back into the main feature story, right? So that's kind of how we kind of work within, our scope for each issue.
What is your favorite part of Evermore? Whether it's the finished product when you're looking through it, is it in the process? What do you look forward to every time you jump back into it?
It's always a blank slate. I think that's one of those nice things is being able to like we have free reign to kind of experiment with design, with photography, and that kind of really helps set the visual storytelling. I think we've kind of set a bar now because of the last few issues that we've done, and we're always like, how can we make this even better, right? How can we make the experience, the storytelling even better? But I think it's that part of it. It's just being able to kind of play around, experiment. It doesn't need to look like anything else that, we're not trying to emulate anybody else. Yeah, we can be inspired by some other designers or publications, but we're kind of doing our own thing, which is nice. We don't have anything that we have to kind of stick to.
That's having an open door like that, where it's not constricted, I guess is maybe the word, as far as what you're looking for.
Yeah, yeah,
That's got to be nice.
yeah. You don't have these parameters set on you where like, it's got to be like this, like, we're Texas Tech University, but it doesn't all have to be red, black, right? Like we kind of stray away from that and kind of push it. We couldn't do that with the first one because we were just pushing out this magazine. And so we did that purposely for the cover, red, black, all that good stuff. But then beyond that, it's like me specifically, I'm like, we need to push these covers. We need to push what we're doing with this. Because I think the more that we do this, the more that I think we'll have some notoriety and people will understand that it's Evermore, it's Texas Tech, right? So I think, yeah, trying not to have too many constrictions on it really helps us from a creative process.
So for somebody who doesn't really understand what goes into an editorial magazine, how does that start from beginning to end? So you send out, let's say you have a magazine go out. How does the starting process go? Do you sit down with the team and y'all decide on stories, or is that kind of something that's already in the works when you're in the production of the most recent magazine?
So it always starts with our editor Glennis. She usually will have kind of the stories that she thinks she wants to go with for whatever issue that we're going to work on. Well, like currently we're issue 6. So she'll kind of give us an idea of like, these are the stories that we're going to be that we'll work on for this issue. And then, we have weekly meetings on this stuff. But then we start thinking about, it's always like timeline. All right. We always timeline. When does this need to hit mailboxes? And then we kind of work backwards. So that's kind of always the starting point. And that way that gives us time for production time, how long it's going to take for it to be produced, how long it's going to take for your edits, design, and then obviously the editorial side of it, the stories. And so normally it's about a 6-month process to get a full issue kind of through everything. But that's usually where it starts. It's always with the stories. All right, which stories are going to be a part of this issue? And then we kind of work backwards from that. And then for me, once I kind of have the stories, I usually will read through it multiple times. I will highlight specific parts of the story that I think are important, highlight pull quotes that I may use for the layout. And then if we have photography, then I'll look through all the photographs, and then I will kind of label, or I will flag a couple of the photos that I think may work for telling that story. And that's usually how I work whenever I start to build out a feature. And of course, once I get to that point, then it's about sketching, because then I have a better sense of what the story is about and visually maybe where I can take it.
So is a lot of the animation on there something that you've sketched, you personally have sketched, or somebody on your team has sketched?
As far as,
I think I'm trying to remember, on the cover of the first Evermore magazine, you have the cover of the individual lady. Can't remember.
I might have it.
Linda K.
Yeah. Okay. So that look, is that something that you were able to do with the photo, or is a lot of it kind of incorporating some hand sketching on that? Yeah. So something like that. It's so cool, and it looks just so, it's different. That's the term that I can really come up with. But
yeah, I think that was one of those where we like myself and then the other designer, Veronica. So she ended up designing that one. We kind of both took a stab at different cover designs, and ultimately we ended up going with that one, just based on the visual look or whatever, because it's a little bit more striking. And so I think hers was mainly, I think within just Photoshop and kind of working that through and then coming to kind of like that final cover design for it. So that I think that's how that one came about for issue one, was we both kind of, you know, gave it a go and tried our own kind of cover designs. And that's kind of where we landed on, was that one for the first one.
Gotcha. And for most people that tend to stumble on creative blocks, I mean, I'm sure you may come to certain walls where you're just like, man, it's not that you're burned out, but there's just, do you just kind of step back a little bit, give it a couple of days, or how do you go through creative blocks that maybe not you, but the entire team is going through? Like, what are ways that you help motivate individuals with that?
I know for me personally, it's always one of those things where and I think it may be a cliche thing. You always kind of step away from it for a little bit. So I may be working on multiple features, and if there's one that I'm just kind of hitting a brick wall on, I'll kind of step away from that and not even mess with it for like a day or whatever. And we'll start messing, either sketching or designing out another one or kind of working through that. And then I usually will come back to it. The other thing usually is, I'll send that off to, we do have a consultant that we work with that his name is TJ Tucker. So if you don't know who he is, he worked at Texas Monthly as a creative director. And I usually like to send him some early editions of the features to try to get his feedback on it. Because sometimes I can run into a wall. Like I did on one here recently where it's not quite coming out the way it needs to come out. And I just emailed it to him so I can kind of get some thoughts from him. But I think that, sending it to my editor and having her kind of look at it, or, Matt looking at it will kind of help with that sometimes. Because sometimes we can kind of get in this kind of silo and, it's kind of hard to break out from that sometimes.
It definitely is. From an entire team standpoint, how do you guys stay motivated? You mentioned working on multiple articles, multiple features, always looking to be bigger and better than the last one, having multiple designers, working on things. Is it maybe a little spirit of competition for motivation, or what does that look like with your team or with the team at Tech?
I think with our team in particular, with Evermore, I think it's a lot of it is just wanting to one up what we've already done, right? Because we go back and look at what we've already done, and we're like, okay, we've kind of set this bar. Now it's a matter of just keep pushing that, keep pushing the photography, the design. I know it is that way for me because I'm very competitive, and so I want to kind of keep pushing beyond that, because we want to be able to have a great piece that comes out and be recognized for it. And so I know for a lot of us, there's a few of us that are, we played sports, competitive. I know our photographer, Ashley Rogers, she's competitive. I mean, she's really good. She's always trying to think of different things, new things, but I'm very competitive. So it's one of those things where I'm always kind of trying to self-motivate myself to try to one up what we've already done.
What sports did you play?
So I played basketball. I was a gym rat only. I didn't get a chance to play football. I did want to, but my dad always was afraid I was going to get hurt. So
that's never happened. Same thing for me. Yeah, why are you playing this sport? There's no reason to. Why do you want to be hit?
Yeah, that's what my dad was. I don't want you to break something, and then how are we going to pay for it? I'm like, whatever. So I was a gym rat. I loved basketball. I was, I grew up in the heyday of the Bulls. I was a huge Chicago Bulls fan, and so that was kind of the time that I grew up in. Bulls, Duke basketball. That was my world. I was always outside shooting the basketball, and so I think always competitive in that world.
Wildly off topic. Being a Bulls fan, I know it's not specifically about MJ, but have you seen Air about Nike?
Yeah, I actually did. It's a really good documentary, really well done. I think that's what's kind of cool, is to see kind of the behind the scenes of how that came about and how that happened, right? Because Jordan didn't want to sign with Nike. He was an Adidas guy. He wanted to sign with Adidas, and so kind of the same thing with them, kind of some tenacity, kind of keep, chasing after him and saying, look, we want to make you a brand. Yeah, no, that's a really good documentary. Like I watched it a couple different times. So
Yeah,
I've watched
big
The
fan.
Last Dance, anything MJ,
Oh,
the
Last
Bulls in the
Dance.
'90s. Yeah, like I'm into all that stuff. I love documentaries. So
Yeah,
No,
I do too.
my wife thinks sports documentaries is just a waste of time, but I don't.
I
I
don't.
mean,
I
I tell
don't
her
think
that
so.
about the Bridgerton shows too.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
Armando, I have a repeat three-peat Bulls hat.
Oh, do you? Dang.
Yeah, yeah. My parents are from Chicago, so my dad was a big Bulls fan, and so when they won that second three-peat, he got I don't know, got online or I don't know, mail order catalog. I don't know. It was the '90s, so who knows? But I got one.
Dude, that's a collector's item. You better hang on to that because
I'm
I'm
going
sure
to.
there's not many people that have that hat.
Yeah,
So,
I'm going to.
yeah, no.
well, the competition between y'all, and then also just getting to just stay, like you said, staying on top of things, wanting to be better. It's paid off. I did read an article saying that the Evermore publication was named best in the country. And so I read here the award winning magazine Evermore has been recognized with the bronze anvil in the magazine category, marketing the best publication magazine in the country. So that is a huge win, I'm sure, for the entire team. You want to explain a little bit about how that felt? And for our listeners who don't know what the print awards are, they honor the broadest range of design work and embrace the illustrious future of design. So that's a pretty big win for your team.
Yeah, the print award is huge. The other one that you referenced was the PRSA award. So that's like the public relations one, but that one was bronze anvil, the best publication, within public relations in the country. And that one was actually given out to us in New York. We had our senior comms director at the time that went and got that, but that was huge. That was not really, we felt good, not as expected, but that was a huge surprise. The print one was a really big surprise. So if, for your listeners, if you don't know, print magazine has always kind of been the standard or staple within the design world for decades, since its inception. And so it, there's only so many categories and there's usually just three winners and that's it, and we won a bronze in that category. So you're talking about the other winners are like the New York Times magazine, you're in the same category as them. And I was trying to think of I think it was like a Fashion Institute in New York was the other winner. I think they were the first place winner. But that was, for me personally, that was huge because I've never won a print award. I've always wanted to. Again, it's up there with like communication arts. Print isn't that same because it's a global award, and so you're competing against the world, with people that submit into that. And so I think that was huge. I think it took a couple of our team a little bit of understanding of what that was, because not everybody's a designer right within that space. And so
Yeah.
how important, how impressive of an award that is. And so that was cool. I actually had the opportunity to go and see that be announced in Nashville at the How Design Conference in June.
Wow.
So
I
my
bet that
boss
was
let
awesome.
me go. Yeah, let me go. And that was like, print had like a little 15-minute segment where they showed all the winners. They had these big O screens. And so that was cool to be able to see our work up there amongst, in the industry people
Yeah.
and the leaders. And so that was that was a cool moment right there for me to be able to be in person and see it. And then when you get a certificate for it, that was all fancy foil stamped. But yeah, I think it goes to show what we're producing, that we've stayed authentic to what our mission is and what we're trying to do with the magazine, and we're not kind of straying from that. But we're hoping this year with issues 4 and 5, we kind of get that same recognition or more so, because we've kind of entered into some of those big ones: print, communication arts, SPD, which is Society of Publication Designers. So all kind of these big ones to kind of show people like what we're producing out here, the stories that we're kind of pushing out through our magazine.
You guys are the real deal. I mean, you put out something that every Red Raider that gets it is proud to receive, including both of us. So
Yeah,
we were vicariously winners through you. So thank you.
yeah, and that's a selective list too. So, and again, I don't even know how that came about, but there's only so many that get the magazine, and so it goes across the country to I think the list is up to like 38,000 Red Raiders, and so it goes from East Coast, West Coast. I think we have some international ones now, and so
Wow.
only so many people get it, and there's a lot of Tech alumni too. So not everybody is fortunate enough to get that publication, but I think the people that are very grateful because we always get really nice comments via email or via our social media account.
So obviously, winning awards like that, it's a standard of success. I mean, that is somewhat it's a standard within the publication world. But how do y'all as a team measure success?
I
With the
think that,
design.
yeah, I mean, for me, it's within the design scope. It's always that part of it, right? Like it can't look like what we've done before, where we have to try to push that part of it. We can't be happy with the success that we've had. We have to keep pushing and moving forward with that. And then the biggest thing I think is it going back to that mission. We have to stay true to what that mission is: captivate, inspire, educate. Like we have to keep that at the forefront of everything that we do, because if we get away from that, then we're kind of getting away from our overall message and storytelling. So I think that's one of those things. And it's all whenever you win stuff like this, the university gets recognition, and it's so it puts a little bit of pressure too, because you need to do even better.
Hmm.
As the further on that we go, how can we push this a little bit more?
So, a question that we like to ask all of our guests is, what's a piece of advice that you've been told that you will never forget?
I think going back to what we talked about earlier is like, don't ever think that you have everything figured out, right? Like we're always be open to always learning something new. I'm always learning newer things, whether it's software, within, whether I'm hitting on my friends to try to get some advice from them. There's always something that I can take from those conversations. I think that's always stuck with me is, always be a learner, always be open to things. Don't ever think that you know everything. I think that's just always a bad mindset. I've had students that I've taught, when I'm an adjunct as a professor in School of Art, that they think they know everything, and you're like, you're 20 something, you don't know anything. Like
Yeah.
you're not even scratching the surface. And for me, I'm 43. I've been doing this for 20 years now, and I don't know it all. I'm still trying to figure it out. I'm still trying to figure out different ways or how to approach different methods.
It's great
No, and
advice.
yeah, I mean, just keep on striving, and most of the times people just kind of struggle to get started on how to figure something out. And in today's world, you have social media, you have the internet, so a lot of the resources that you didn't have in your time back then, when it was nothing but floppy disk to transfer stuff, is
Yeah.
now available. So that's something that we hope our listeners take in is, it's never too late to learn something, and just keep striving to want to learn more.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where I, always look at different websites that I'm interested in that have different designers that, I'm like, man, they're putting out some amazing work. Like, I want to get to that level. It's always one of those motivating things for me. It's, um, I want to get to that level. I want to always constantly feel like I'm striving towards that I haven't reached my full potential yet. Right. So, yeah, hopefully I'm like 60, 70, still trying to do this, trying to figure out stuff somehow,
Yeah.
because yeah, you're never too old to learn anything new, or, and if I don't know the answer to things, you try to find people that do, or if not, it's just like, you try to problem solve stuff, right? With this issue 6 and some production stuff, I know Ian's kind of helped out. Will, Pulowski, who's our rep, it's that part of it. I don't know some of that stuff. I lean on him because of what he knows, and then he'll lean on, y'all for what and expertise. And so I think it's always nice to have that, is be able to lean on other people and learn some new things and how things are done, or how can things be accomplished, right? An idea be accomplished.
Well, I think if And just to be completely honest, I think you push us to our limits sometimes to where we
I
even
agree
didn't
with
know
that.
we could do something. And then we figure something out. We're like, oh, we can do it. This is a new service that we can add. So just that inspiration of just wanting to up the next magazine and up the next one actually pushes your vendors, your, other vendors that you work with to kind of scratch the surface on, hey, let's see if we can try something new. So we appreciate you for that because we always hear high praise, and most people I think see the things that you've done and think, okay, that's way out left field. That's not something that we can do. But that isn't the case. There are several ways that you can incorporate things within the design to really add a unique look, a different style to that. And I think that's what many universities struggle with. Um, but as you say, you're currently trying to learn things to, if it's not within the paper, it's within the story or whatever the case is. So
Yeah,
yeah.
there's creative ways to do that. Yeah, and I'm grateful for you guys. Y'all been a great partner to kind of problem solve those things. 'Cause, yeah, we'll come out with a random idea, and you're like, I don't know, we'll see if we can do it. But I think that's great is to be able to lean on different people to come up with those ideas. But yeah, there's if you have a small budget, there's a way to be creative and do something unique and interesting. Like I did that when I was in the agency world. We didn't have the biggest budgets on stuff. When we'd have to send out a kind of a cool invitation for me, I was like, all right, it's, really pushing the design part of it. And maybe we can do something with like a nice paper stock and, those types of things. So it's always trying to figure out how can you add value to that piece or that project in a way where it will engage people, right? I think going back to you were talking about that measure of success. I think that's something that gets lost is are you engaging people with the things that you're producing? Does it move people? And if you're not doing that, then it's just you're just throwing money down the drain, right? Because if people don't engage with it and they don't kind of reciprocate that, then it's not succeeding. It's not doing what it should be doing.
Yeah. And we couldn't agree more, but you're preaching to the choir at this point. So, man, Armando, thank you so much for your time today. Thank you for uh, your expertise and a little bit about what goes on behind the scenes behind Evermore. Couldn't be happier to have you on.
Yeah, we look forward to seeing future issues, seeing how y'all progress, and we wish you all the best and success with Evermore.
Yeah, I appreciate you. Thanks, Ian and Lorenzo. Like I said, it's been fun being able to talk about this stuff, and hopefully, some people take something away from this, or and again, you guys are a great resource with the podcast, what you're doing here. So that's always good. Again, if anybody ever needs, has questions or whatever, I'm happy to lend any advice or anything if anybody has anything, any listeners.
Hopefully your email box doesn't just get absolutely blown up when this drops.
That's okay.
Yeah.
I always try to be helpful in any way that I can be. So.
So, well, cool. Well, thank you guys for listening to this episode of Binding Minds. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Binding Minds Podcast. We'll see you next time.